Alrighty, here we go. Ball up top, episode 9. Can't believe we made it this far, but it's been a blast having you guys along for the ride. Recording this on Sunday, January 25th, after a great day of basketball yesterday on the 24th. I know a lot of you guys with college football, especially Auburn fans. You might be tuning in late to college basketball, and this year and last year, kind of a rare occurrence for some of our Indiana listeners too. I feel like you guys have obviously been locked into football for the long duration of the season. So we kind of decided that we do maybe a little longer episode today and kind of re go through our top 25 teams as the AP poll has them, and maybe mention whether or not we think this team can or can't win the big one. This year, it seems like we got a couple of top heavy teams, but I mean, there's a lot of teams that I think could make a push in March. But without further ado, we'll kick it off with number one Arizona. This is a team that's 20-0, has looked dominant in every facet of the game. They took down our Tigers earlier this year by a landslide, led predominantly by Jaden Bradley and Koa Pete. For me, this is a team that can definitely win it all.
Yeah, no question about it. They've been pretty much from the tip of the season with that win against Florida in the opener. They've just rolled through their schedule to this point. That being said, the Big 12 is five or six teams deep, in my opinion, of teams that could win that league. With Arizona obviously being at the top, but no reason for me to doubt what Tommy Lloyd has rolling right now. You know, Jaden Bradley, I think, has been one of the bigger surprises of the season and kind of being the lead guard for Arizona. That's exactly what a national championship contender needs to kind of step up as a veteran guard around some of the star freshmen that they have in Koa Pete and Braden Burries. So um, they've got size, they can play defense, they can score at all three levels. They really have just looked for the most part unstoppable at this point. And they're probably going to get tripped up in Big 12 play. They've got some tough. They go to BYU tomorrow. Actually, that should be a really fun game. And then they got to go to Fog. They got to go to Houston. So um, the Big 12, and we'll continue to talk about this as we go through the rankings. But it's a fun league right now with several teams that, in my opinion, can win the national title as of right now, January 25th.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything y'all have said about Arizona. They got the resume, they have the analytics, they have the star players. And that was a good point about the Big 12, Hunter. To me, the Big 12 is going to be the most fun conference to watch in February
Yep,
and March
I
in
agree.
the title race. I mean, we'll talk about it, I'm sure, in a bit, but we saw yesterday with the Texas Tech and Houston game. That was an awesome game, and those are two teams that are going to be right there at the top with Arizona. So excited to watch Arizona going forward. Definitely can win the Natty, and very excited about this Big 12 race in the last couple months of the regular season.
Yep, that brings us to number two, UConn, a Hurley-led team. This team, if you haven't watched them up until this point, they play hard defense. They are 19-1 with their only loss at home to Arizona without Terrace Reed, who's a big impact player for them, and it was a great game. They had a narrow escape against Villanova yesterday in a slugfest of a game. Very fun to watch. Went to overtime. They closed them out by 8. This team to me is pretty deep. They've got a lot of production, analytically favoring from Demery, even though his stat line doesn't show it. They're led a lot by Terrace Reed and Solo Ball. And then they've got a good freshman off the bench, Braden Mullins. I've got him on my top 10 freshman players of the year up until this point, averaging 11, 3, and 1. His stat line might not show it, but this guy's a flamethrower offensively. And when the team needs a bucket, which this team, I mean, they're not the best offensive team, but when they need a bucket, he's a good guy to go to. This is a team that I think also can win it all.
Yeah, I agree. Their offense hasn't really seemed to click yet either. Kind of seems like a bit of opposite of how they've been the past couple of years, but they're playing some awesome
For sure.
defense, and their offense is going to get going. If they can stay healthy, and they have guys who can score at all three levels, and multiple guys who can go get a big shot. I agree with I would not want to face this team in March.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting, like, especially in their last handful of games, like they're not really blowing teams away in the Big East. I think we would all agree they're the consensus best team in the Big East, and it
Big
may
East
not
is
be
awful.
close, but um, they're really like, I mean, they've won a lot of games in the 60s. They beat Seton Hall 69-64. They beat Georgetown 64-62. Like, it really, Josh, to your point, is kind of opposite of what we've seen from some of these Dan Hurley teams the last few years, where they're 38th in offense on KenPom and 40th on Torvik, but they're fourth in defense on both. So it's really been kind of a dig your heels in, lock down on that end of the floor effort from UConn to this point. I do think that could potentially be something to watch later in the year if they're lacking a little bit of offensive firepower. But that said, Peyton, you made the point. They've got the guys, right? They've got veterans in, Solo Ball, Demery, Terrace Reed, Caravan, who's been around forever and has, knows what it takes to win a title. And then Braylon Mullins for some freshman firepower. So I don't think it's a huge concern yet. Maybe just something to watch if you're looking for something that could potentially trip up some of these top teams. But with them playing defense like they are, I have no doubts that they'll start to find it more on the offensive end. And I don't see anyone stopping them in the Big East, at least at this point. I think they're in really good position to earn a 1 seed and absolutely can win a title.
Sure, that's a good point that you had about them being, 40th in offensive efficiency in KenPom and around there in Torvik, because, I think statistically the last chunk of national champions have been top 25 in both offense and defense.
Yep.
So we all saying unanimously that they have a shot to win a title. It is interesting statistically they fall outside of that, that category. Um, that being said, going to number 3, Michigan. This team to me is better than UConn, and I think every bit as good as Arizona. They're a team that I think can definitely win it all. They're deep with size with Mara, Cheddar, and of course Yaxel Lenberg. They've got better guard production. Cadeau has had a great year, which was surprising to me. I know I called him out earlier in the year as he struggled a little bit at UNC, but Michigan has been a wagon. They've had a couple of close games as of late, including a loss at home to Wisconsin, which was relatively surprising. That being said, outside of those, 4 or 5 close games, they've murdered the other, 75% of the
Yeah.
teams that they've played. This team is extremely dominant, in my opinion, and I would, again, take them as my probably number 2 team to win it all.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily argue that. I think that, yeah, there have been a couple close calls. It was funny. I think I texted you guys right before they lost to Wisconsin, like the day or two before, and we're like, somebody's gonna trip them up at some point with as many close calls as they've had. And sure enough, they lost to Wisconsin at home about 2 weeks ago. But also an interesting week for them. They have Nebraska at home Tuesday, and then they go to Michigan State on Saturday or Friday, actually. So big week for Michigan in terms of sort of cementing themselves. I think they've to this point very much are in that conversation for the best team in the country. And I think, if anything, cause for concern, it's kind of what we talked about from the beginning with them is can, the likes of Elliot Cadeau and Namari Burnett, some of the guards, carry them late into the season. But that said, they've been able to overwhelm teams with size and defense. I think yeah, defensively, they're number 2 on KenPom and they're number 1 on Torvik. So, really, really solid on both ends of the floor. Just don't make a lot of mistakes. They've just found themselves in some close games, but that's really college basketball at the end of the day. So, yeah, I mean, another team that I think is in great position for a 1 seed and can make a run at the title.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned their size. They're going to be an impossible matchup for half the teams that they play, just based
Yeah.
off size alone. And then the teams that do match up decently with them, most of the time they're just better than. So it's going to be tough to beat Michigan. You're going to have to shoot the ball really well. You're going to have to do a really good job, or as good of a job as you can do on the glass, which isn't easy against those bigs. And Payne, you called out Cheddar. I mean, I've been watching him since he was a freshman at Michigan, where he actually got some decent minutes as a freshman, and he's come a long way since then. He was kind of a liability out on the court I think it was 3 or 4 years. I think he's a senior now, so 4 years ago. But yeah, he's turned into a pretty solid role player. I think he might be the only, maybe there's one other guy from their old guard there, but Dusty May and his staff has done a good job of developing him. So yeah, to me, Michigan's the favorite in the Big Ten at this point. And like Hunter said, big week for them coming up. So we'll see what they're made of.
All righty. It takes us to number 4, Purdue. I'll kind of let you kick us off with this, Josh, being a Big Ten team, a rival team. I have this team marked as a team that will not win it all. Well, Braden Smith is great. I wouldn't say I love him personally. Trey Kaufman-Renn, great. Lawyer, great. To me, I haven't seen a game where all three of them like are cooking at the same time, and I feel like that's pretty rare for them. Braden Smith is great, like Josh has mentioned multiple times. Great passer of the ball, maybe all-time leading assist leader in the NCAA when it's all said and done, depending on how deep they go in March. They just suffered another loss in Mackey at home to Illinois, losing by 6 behind the likes of another talented freshman, Keaton Wagler, with 46 points last night. One of the better shooting collegiate games I've ever seen, especially from a
Crazy.
freshman. 9 for 11 from 3, 13 from 17 from the field, and again, 46 points. But not to pull the light off of Purdue, but Josh, kind of where's your head at with this team?
Yeah, I think you made a good point about all three of them not really being on at the same time. I think I saw something on Twitter yesterday or today that Fletcher Lawyers, he's shooting like maybe 20, 25% from three in his last 4 or 5 games, which, that's his job is to make threes. So if he's not going to contribute there, that's a huge miss on their part. And even in the Illinois game yesterday, he wasn't on the court down the stretch, which you expect from your number three guy, your senior, one of the leaders on your team. And Painter didn't trust him to pay him or to play him. So, that's definitely a cause for concern for Purdue. That being said, they still have a loaded roster, still have a great coach. We got Purdue in Assembly Hall on Tuesday. Don't love that they're coming off 2 consecutive losses, but that should be a great environment and a great game. So I'm excited for that. Um, I think they can win the Natty. I don't think they're going to. I do find it funny that Indiana football won a national championship before Purdue basketball won a national championship. That makes me very happy.
Yes,
Um,
sir.
but no, I think they are definitely talented, and if they put it together, they will be there in the second and third weekend. But at the end of the day, I think teams like Arizona, Michigan, Duke might be just a step ahead of them. But on any given day, Purdue can knock off one of those teams. So we'll see how they kind of progress down the rest of the year. And something to watch would be TKR and Fletcher Lawyer helping out Braden Smith because as great as Braden Smith is, he can't do it all on his own.
Yeah, I mean that's my biggest takeaway with them is I think you've got to have more production out of TKR. I mean, he was their leading scorer last year. I know he was banged up, got into the season a little bit later, hasn't played at all their games. Um, but I just think like Braden Smith he can score, but that's not when he's at his best. And I think having Lawyer on the wing as a shooter and TKR kind of playing bully ball down low is when they're really at their best. And I just think he's going to have to have an uptick in his production for Purdue to be able to run the table. But again, they've got the roster build, they've got veterans all over the place. That I'd have to imagine they're one of the older starting fives in college basketball. Um, but yeah, just haven't necessarily looked dominant like I think some people thought they would coming into the season. And they're going to drop in the rankings for sure. I mean, they're have 3 losses now. So I mean, I think you probably see them closer to the bottom of the top 10. I don't know if they fall out, but rough week for them. I expect them to bounce back. Be interesting to see them go to Assembly Hall on Tuesday. Um, but yeah, just haven't quite, I think, looked the part of what their preseason expectations were, but certainly capable of running the table.
Yeah, Josh, I got a question for you from a lot of our listeners from are into gambling. So from a gambler's perspective here off of 2 losses and dropping. I know last podcast we talked about, Florida and Texas Tech, buy stock now, get good value on them. And sure enough, I think not to toot our own horn, that has been a relatively good call as far as Purdue losing those two games and probably falling. Is this a time to buy in on Purdue from a gambling perspective?
Yeah, I mean, if there is a time, it would be now. They were either the favorites preseason or top three in odds, I believe, to win the national championship. So I imagine that Michigan's past them, Arizona's past them, probably Duke, maybe UConn. So if you are a believer in this Purdue team, now is probably the best time to buy. I don't know if they'll have another stretch where they lose two games in a row. Hopefully, they lose three games in a row and lose on Tuesday. But yeah, I mean, if you are want to ride Matt Painter in March, be my guest. Now is the time to do it.
All
Yeah, I mean, you can
righty.
get them. You can get them sort of a tier below some of those other teams right now. They're, according to FanDuel, they're plus 1,800 with
Oh wow.
Illinois and Iowa State. So they're kind of a step below, big step below Michigan and Arizona, and then Duke, Houston, and UConn are up there as well. So they have dropped a little bit in odds. So to that point, could be if you like the way the roster is built and you like the veteran makeup of their team. Could be a good time to get in.
Alrighty, that takes us to number 5, Duke. To me, I have Duke probably right behind Michigan, ahead of UConn, as the third best team in the country right now, being led predominantly by one of the more efficient seasons we've ever seen in college basketball out of a freshman, Cam Boozer, averaging 23.7 points, 9.9 rebounds, and to me, surprising 4 assists. This Duke team is very good. They're very long, and they've got a lot of shooting from Isaiah Evans, and Caleb Foster has been a little bit of a surprise the way he shot the ball from three. They've had a great season up until this point, and the ACC is interesting to me. I think there are probably 5 good teams. That being said, I think Duke is a leg up on all of them. I think they're going to run through conference play predominantly and probably come into March as a 1 seed. This is definitely a team for me that can win it all.
I love this team, unfortunately, because I know Duke is, for the most part, a universally disliked basketball program. Cam Boozer, man, he's been absolutely unreal. I mean, I saw something the other day that I sent you guys. They stacked up his numbers versus what Cooper Flag had done. I don't know if that was Cooper Flag over the season or like to this point through X amount of games, but um, he's got him cleared in pretty much every stat, including like efficiency, like field goal percentage, 3-point percentage. He's shooting like 38% from three,
It's
which is
crazy.
just ridiculous to me. It's not a part of his game that I expected him to have. Um, but yeah, it seemingly with these John Shire teams, they've got length all over. I mean, from 1 through 5. Um, Patrick Ngongba's been a really good defensive presence in the middle. Seems like they've always got a dominant center to go alongside their Paolo Banqueros, their you know Boozers, Flags, and they've got guards that have played a good amount of college basketball. I mean, Foster, to your point, Peyton, I think has been. I had some questions about him coming into the year, and I think you're starting to see Caden Boozer, the lesser known twin, kind of cycle into more of the lead point guard role. But Isaiah Evans has been really good this year, and he's really not even shooting. He's shooting 35% from three, so not quite even to his full potential yet. But um, you know, they've got Sar also. Like they've got length all over. They've got a star player. They've got guards that can shoot it from outside. Um, I really like the makeup of this team, and I think I'm probably right there with you, Peyton, of having them third behind Arizona, Michigan. It's kind of weird. I was looking at so Ken Palm and Evan Mia have Duke number 3 overall. They have them. Ken Palm's got them top 5 in both offensive and defensive efficiency. Torvik has them number 8, and they're 17th in offense and 11th in defense. So there's a pretty big discrepancy there between
Sure.
two of the primary analytics sites. I know something that we were talking about this week is looking at like the player efficiency, like offensive and defensive, and Cam Boozer, along with Yaxel Lindenberg, they're like in another stratosphere when it comes to like two-way efficiency ability on both ends of the floor. Um, don't see that stopping anytime soon. He's been every bit as dominant as Flag and probably more to this point. Um, I really like this Duke team. I trust John Shire as much as any coach in the country, I think. And there's some good teams, there's some tournament teams in the ACC, but I don't know that there's anyone that challenges them for that title.
Yeah, I mean, y'all pretty much covered it all on my thoughts on Duke. I agree. I think they're definitely in that top tier of teams. And I as much as like Duke gets talked about, I don't know if they're being talked about enough this year.
I agree.
They're
Outside of
still
Boozer,
right, obviously, but they're still get talked about because they're Duke, but maybe it's because of the conference they play in, maybe it's whatever. But they're a great team, like you said. They're built very solidly. They can score at all three levels. They can seem to do everything right. I do think that a Michigan versus Duke matchup would be insanely fun basketball to watch. So I'm kind of hoping we get that. Um,
well, Josh, I have some great news for you
oh,
because
they do, right.
smack in the middle of conference play for whatever reason, Duke and Michigan play in Washington D.C. on February 21st.
That's right. Yeah.
Don't know why.
Duke,
They did this with Illinois last year too. Duke did.
yeah, I think maybe the Big Ten has like a week break at one point. So they and Duke, I guess maybe the ACC does it as well, so that they're trying to get an extra out of conference game. But I love that. I think that's so fun to play. And before the season, we didn't really know that those would probably be two one seeds, but that could be a easily be an Elite Eight or Final Four or even championship preview. So
Yeah.
that's exciting. And that's cool. It's in DC. I feel like both teams will have a good amount of fans there, but probably will have to think it would lean Duke.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, no, I'm pretty high on this Duke team. I think they're definitely one of the top three contenders.
That'll take us to number six, Houston. This is a team that I believe unanimously we had as our was it national champion.
All three of
Between
us.
us three, I love Sampson's teams. This team is honestly maybe one of the more fun ones to watch. That being said, I'm going to go out on a limb, maybe a little bit of a hot take. I do not think this is a Houston team that can win at all. Sampson has prided his team off of gritty guard play, which he has, but they have struggled to defend. I think we saw that a little bit last night with Texas Tech. They've been led predominantly by, again, another talented freshman, Kingston Flemings. Um, 17 points, 3 rebounds, 5 assists. Last night, again, another great freshman performance, 42 points, 15 for 26 from the field and 4 for 9 from three. I mean, another freshman scoring 40 points. It's been insane. That being said, they lost in Lubbock. This is not your mama's Houston team. They don't defend like teams of the past. They're pretty young. Obviously, they've got Sharp and Uzan back. Interested to see how conference play goes. I think they're going to win some. They're going to lose some. They're going to fall probably right around that 2-3 seed line. I think their draw is very important for this team. But I just think down the stretch, the consistency and the amount of point production they require from a freshman might trip them up in March. So I do not have this team as a team that I think will win it all.
Yeah, I think they can. They're definitely not. I'm not as high as them as I was preseason. Obviously, picking them to win it all, I would lean probably Michigan or Duke at this point. But I still think they have what it takes. Every time I watch a Houston game and it's close down the stretch, it seems like one of their veteran guards hits a big time shot. I know they lost yesterday, and you called out the freshman performance. I bookmarked this on Twitter. I saw this was from Jeff Brazello. He said, per ESPN research, this is the first day in at least the last 20 seasons into which multiple D1 freshmen have scored 40 plus points in a game, and there were actually three of them yesterday with Wagler, Flemings, and the Bansta, which we haven't talked about yet. So that's kind of crazy. It just goes to show how deep this freshman class is. Great time to have a lottery pick if you're an NBA team. But yeah, no, I agree. I think that Houston, they're still fifth on Torvik and on defense and eighth on offense, which is pretty high for them. So we'll see. They split with Texas Tech. They won at home, lost on the road yesterday. We'll see what their matchups look like with Kansas, with BYU. So I don't know. I think this is part of the definitely the top 4 or 5 teams in the Big 12. I think they have a chance to compete for the Big 12 title. And if they do win the Big 12, they're right up there in contention for a one seed, which, like you said, Payne, I agree, the draw would help with them. So if they can get that one seed, then yeah, sky's the limit for them.
Yeah, I mean, Torvik and Evan Mia both have them top 10 in both offensive and defensive efficiency. I think Evan Mia actually has them fourth on defense. I'm not really concerned with Houston to this point. I probably wouldn't have them as my national championship pick at this moment, but um, again, Josh, you made the point about like Uzan and Sharp. Those are certainly two guys that I would want in my corner come March. Um, I think coming into the year, I think I had kind of circled those two and JoJo Tugler as sort of the veteran returnees from a team that made the title game last year, and you added in Chris Sinak and Kingston Flemings, who's been all world. I think they'll be just fine. I trust Kelvin Sampson. Um, from a depth perspective, like outside of those five, they only have one other guy that plays more than 15 minutes a game, and Isaiah Harwell, who's another freshman. So that could potentially be cause for concern with them. I think a large chunk of their production is coming from those five. Fleming, Sharp, Tugler, and then the two freshmen, or Uzan and Cenac as well. So uh, I'm not ready to hit the panic button on them quite yet, but they've been in some games that were a little bit closer calls. I mean, they only have two losses to Tennessee back in the Vegas players era, and then yesterday to Texas Tech, which they already beat Texas Tech at home. Those are both 4-point games, and I'll speak a little more about Texas Tech here in a bit. I think they're a really good team with the firepower to knock off anybody, especially at home. They've got a good home court advantage, so I'm not panicking a ton on Houston yet. But again, Big 12 schedule, they've got some tough games. They got to go to the Fog, to Iowa State, to BYU. Got another game against Arizona. So again, man, the Big 12 is just it's gonna be really fun down the stretch. But I'm still pretty comfortable saying that Houston can win a national title at this point.
That takes us to number 7, Nebraska, a team that, a lot of people have been asking about. Is this team really that good? And honestly, they're coming in at 7 right now, but probably as of tomorrow, expect to see them move up the rankings at 20-0, one of our few still undefeated teams, I believe, with Miami of Ohio and Arizona. This Nebraska team has looked, they've up until this point, they've looked great. They've been led by a lot of big second halves as of late. The last couple of games have been trailing at halftime, and then they pulled out dominant victories. Haven't seen them truly in a dogfight, so I'm interested to see how that plays out. I also haven't watched a lot of Nebraska ball. That being said, this is not a team, in my opinion, that can win it all as well. And I think if you have Nebraska stock, time to offload it, time to sell it.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think they're going to win it all. But I definitely think they've been the story of the 2025-2026 college basketball season so far. They just find ways to win, and I can touch on it more when we talk about the full Indiana recap. But they were they were dead in the water against us, and they came back and ended up winning that game. But yeah, no, they're led by a lot of seniors. Sam Hoiberg, he's pesky. Mast has really made some jumps over the past couple of years. He's really solid. And then Price Sandford transferring in, he's been really good. So yeah, they're definitely better than I thought. And I think they're contenders. I guess at this point you have to call them contenders to win the Big Ten, and make the second weekend in the tournament, maybe make a run to the Final Four. But I think once they run into Arizona, Duke, Michigan, UConn, I don't know if they're gonna have the firepower to withstand that. But who knows? They've won every game so far, so maybe they just run the table.
Yeah, I mean, I want to give them credit for what they've done to this point. Going 20-0 against any schedule is impressive. They won a rock fight against Michigan State there to open conference play. You know, won a tough battle at Assembly Hall against Indiana. But I just, they beat Illinois, I guess, a little bit earlier when there was the Big Ten kind of started conference play early and then jumped back to a few non-con games. So, um, they have some impressive wins to their resume, but I think I'm just of the opinion that you have to like kind of earn the right and show me that you're a national title contender. And I think I'm just kind of in wait and see mode with Nebraska at this point. Peyton, I haven't watched a lot of them either. Um, Certainly will. They've got some big games coming up this week. They go to Michigan and they've got Illinois again at home. So, and then Purdue the following week. So we're gonna learn about Nebraska real quick, and how they really stack up against some of the big boys in college basketball. But again, full credit what they've done to this point. I just want to kind of see them prove it a little bit more before I'm ready to call them a team that's capable of winning it all.
Yeah,
All
and
right,
they're still real quick on them. They're
yeah,
still,
yeah.
they're 14th in Torvik and they're 12th in Ken Palm right now. So, the analytics aren't completely sold on them
Yeah,
and
not super high.
but a lot of that could be some, I don't know how much preseason weightings or preseason rankings and analytics are weighted in at this point, but they definitely had to climb up. They didn't start in the top 10. So there could be a little bit of that playing in it, but the analytics aren't completely sold on them yet. But like I said, to their credit, they've won every game they played so far, so definitely have to pay attention.
So that brings us to number 8, Gonzaga. Now, when I'm looking at the landscape of the top 25 in my 1 through 7 that we just went through, I had 4 teams I thought could win it all. In my 8 through 14, I also have 4 teams. Again, this year, top heavy with Arizona and Michigan, but I think there are some teams farther back that can make a push, and they fall kind of in this section for me. That being said, number 8 Gonzaga is not one of them. I do not think this is a team that can win it all, despite how much the metrics and analytics love this Gonzaga team, led by Graham Ike, obviously a great coach in Mark Few, Tyron Grant Foster. I mean, this is a team that plays a loaded front schedule, which I respect because they know damn well that their conference schedule doesn't give them the greatest, I guess, litmus test as to where they'll stack up in March. Team's going to win a lot of games. I think they're a lock to be a 2 or maybe even a 1 seed, depending on things crumble, because I don't see them getting tripped up throughout the remainder of the season. Um, Again, coming in at 8, is a good team. I'm not blown away with them.
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to learn anything new about Gonzaga really between now and Selection Sunday, in my opinion. If we do, it's negative, right? Like, I don't think just given the conference that they play in, and really in a year where I guess St. Mary's has still been pretty solid. They're usually kind of the clear second team in that league. Um, but again, I just don't think in looking at their schedule, like we're not going to learn anything crazy that would raise their stock from this point in the year. I think the Braden Huff injury is very significant and something to monitor. I don't know that there's really a clear timetable on that at this point. I saw like 4 to 8 weeks earlier this week. And if he's someone that's not, right in full go come March, which hopefully he will be, that's going to be a big problem for them, in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, they had an impressive non-conference. Obviously, they're 21-1 with they got blown out by Michigan in the championship of the Players era, which several teams have been blown out by Michigan. They beat Kentucky, beat UCLA. They beat Alabama. That's a good win.
Is it?
But well, I don't know. Um, but yeah, like I think we're just going to kind of have to wait to see where they land seed wise. I think a 2 or a 3 is probably most likely. They're not going to have more than like 5 losses, I wouldn't think. Um, and we'll kind of see what happens from there. But yeah, the analytics are high seemingly every year on Gonzaga, regardless of the schedule that they play. Mark Few was a Sweet 16 machine there. I think did that streak break last year? I think it did. He had a streak of Sweet 16s there for a while, I think. And I can't remember, they played a 1 seed last year. I can't remember who, but um, yeah, they've got some guys they've got size. Um, Tyon Grant Foster was sort of a March legend at Grand Canyon a year or two ago, but um, tough for me to say on can they win it all. I'm going to lean towards no. I think they're a really good team. I think they're a second weekend team, but um, I just don't know if they've quite got the pieces, especially with Huff's status up in the air, uh, to be able to win it all.
Yeah, I pretty much agree. I think that Gonzaga would be an interesting team to kind of follow that Duke model, maybe get on Duke's schedule next year for a February game, just so they can get one of those neutral site competitive games in February and March before they
Yeah.
go into postseason play. I mean, Graham Ike he's a stud, really dominant. And him and Tucker DeVries are actually been going back and forth all season on the active point leaders in college basketball right now. So that's kind of been a fun storyline to watch as an IU fan to see him, and kind of just depends on game by game and the schedule who's leading that. But yeah, no, I agree. I'm looking at their future games on Torvik. It looks like Torvik has the at Santa Clara and at St. Mary's games being close games. Both of those are Gonzaga's favored by 2.6 points. And then besides those two, the next closest one is at San Francisco, and they're 9.9 point favorites. So really seems like they're going to have two more tests on their schedule. Obviously, could slip up anywhere, but yeah, like y'all said, we kind of know everything we're going to know about Gonzaga going forward. So just about, can they take what they did during the out of conference play before, when they're playing some really competitive games, and kind of translate that and learn what they did from Michigan, because that Michigan game was one of the most, I don't know if it was impressive by, okay, it was 100% impressive by Michigan, but Gonzaga also looked just incompetent out there. So hopefully they can learn from that and kind of translate that for their March Madness run.
Okay, that takes us to number 9, Iowa State. This is a team for me that can win it all. Metrics love them. Joshua Jefferson is one of the
Stud.
more efficient, impactful players in college basketball. He means a lot to this team. They've got Lipsky and I think Milanovic, uh,
Momcilovic, or yeah,
Momcilovic, whatever it is.
probably butchering that.
That's a good three-headed dragon right there. I think this team is very good. I know they've had two recent slip-ups. To me, this is a team to buy stock on with Texas Tech and Florida. I think you could probably get pretty good value on them. I love Oxelberger, their head coach, and his tight T-shirts, but I'm high on this Iowa State team. I love their home court advantage. I think that plays big during conference play.
Yeah, Iowa State to me, I mean, you mentioned they slipped up against Kansas and Cincinnati, and those games weren't particularly close. Then they kind of rebounded against UCF and Oklahoma State. So seems like they're ridden the ship a bit. You know, Otz's teams always play super hard on defense, but they're getting some good scoring this year. I mean, it was against Alcorn State, who is 339th on Torvik out of like 350 something, I think. But they scored 132 points against them, and which is insane in college basketball. Um, I do want to give a shout out to, I didn't watch this game, so I didn't hear it at all. But yesterday when they played Oklahoma State, they had Fanta and Tom Crean on the call,
Ooh,
which that is a dynamic duo that I hope they do more games together.
Yeah.
I want to tune into that one going forward. But yeah, I agree, Peyton. Iowa State is a good team. They play hard on defense, and with the offensive excuse me, offensive production again this year, I think they're definitely a threat to make a deep run. And again, we've kind of talked about it throughout these rankings, because the top 10 is loaded with Big 12 teams. They seem to be one of those, three or four teams that are going to be competing for the Big 12 championship in March.
Yeah, this is a top three seed in my opinion. I don't really see them falling below that. I think the trio of Lipsy, Jefferson, and Momcilovic is one of the better trios in all of college basketball. I think Joshua Jefferson, if not for some outrageous numbers by Cam Boozer and some other people, is right there in the Player of the Year conversation. He's been absolutely awesome. We know that they're going to turn it up on the defensive end when it matters. But again, this is odds. This has sort of been a team that has come into March, on one of those high seed lines and sort of underwhelmed, notoriously the last few years. So again, we said it over and over about the Big 12. If you look at their February schedule, it's gonna be fun. They, Kansas, Houston, BYU, Texas Tech, Arizona. They play all of them in a span of 5 out of 6 games from February 14th to March 2nd. So a lot of tests for them. It's funny. Josh, you were talking about the Torvik game projections. I was looking at Iowa State's. Actually, they're only, according to Torvik, underdogs in 2 of those games, at BYU and at Arizona. So, if they walk out of the season with 4 losses with the Big 12 schedule that they played and a fairly decent non-con schedule. I mean, they whooped Purdue and the St. John's win maybe isn't quite as impressive now as it looked at the time, but um, if they can walk out of the regular season with even 5 or 6 losses, I think they're absolutely a 2 seed probably. And I think they're capable. I think that trio that's been at Iowa State for a little bit, they're capable of winning a national title.
All right, that takes us to number 10, Michigan State, Big Ten powerhouse led by Izzo. Fears has been great. His assist to turnover ratio is tops in the country, up there with fellow Big Ten rival Braden Smith. Jackson Kohler has been a little more productive than I thought he would be. And then watching the highlights, if you are a fan of college basketball, Cohen Carr, some of the dunks and putbacks, this guy can jump out
Yeah.
of the gym. For Auburn fans, he's like a more athletic Malik Dunbar. This guy is not afraid to put people on a poster, and it feels like every pass that's in the air, he's trying to catch it and jam it on someone's head. This Michigan State team's a little more fun to watch than typical Izzo teams. I'm pretty high on them. This is another team for me that could win it all.
Yeah, I don't know if Michigan State's going to win it all. I think come March, I don't know if they're going to have those one-on-one matchups that they're going to be able to win. You called out Jeremy Pierce. He's great. I think yesterday I saw he had 17 points and 17 assists in one game, which is, I mean, that's about as perfect as a game you can play as a starting point guard in college basketball. But yeah, he's a stud. Jackson Kohler, he's another guy that I've been watching since he was a freshman, and he's really progressed. And that's something that Michigan State, I don't know if it gets talked about a lot. Something that they do well as long as Purdue. They develop guys and they have guys in their system for 3 or 4 years. They don't really have that many guys that transfer out. And they'll bring in a couple transfers a year to kind of fill holes when needed. But they Izzo really does a good job of developing guys and getting guys to commit to the program for 4 years. And you can tell by the way they play. They play together, especially on the defensive end. They're playing hard. They're diving for loose balls, getting rebounds. It's a pretty typical Izzo coach team. That being said, I kind of expect them to have a pretty typically coached Izzo exit, at least recently. I mean, I think they can make a run, but I'd say their ceiling is probably what they were last year, which that was Elite Eight to all, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think offensively they're capped a little bit when it comes to March. I mean, they're one of, if not the best defensive teams in the country. I think when you get into those games late in March, like you're going to come up against a guard or a wing that's just a dominant scorer, and I just think that the offensive output is going to limit their ability to run the table. Very good team. I think they can absolutely make the Elite Eight again, depending on their draw. But I just they're 48 on Ken Palm in offensive efficiency, and they are 54th on Torvik. Now that said, they're 1 and 2 in defense respectively, but I think when you get late into the season, having that defense is great, but you got to put the ball in the bucket and be able to outscore teams. And I just don't know if they're going to be able to do that over the stretch of how many ever games you got to win it all, 5 or 6.
And I am excited to watch these Michigan State games this year. There was kind of a bit of controversy last year with the Michigan State. They have like a tradition where their seniors like kiss the center court or whatever when they get checked out for
Yeah,
the
yeah.
their last home game. And Dusty May had like his players stand like on the court, and there was kind of like I don't know if they ever got like physical, but some verbal stuff. And Dusty May was a little bit salty in his post game presser. So those will be some fun matchups to watch both on and off the court with Michigan State and Michigan this year.
I couldn't agree more. Kind of to speed things up for the next 15 teams, we're going to break them down in groups of 5. I'll kind of go through 11 through 15. Right now, we can say, kind of teams that we think can still win it all, and then any talking points, any hot news on any of the 5 that we mentioned. But going right now, we've got our 11 through 15 coming in at number 11, Illinois, number 12, Texas Tech, number 13, BYU, number 14, Virginia, and number 15, Vandy. To me, I've got two teams in this 11 through 15 that I think could win it all if the stars align correctly. Texas Tech at 12 that we just talked about. I think they've got a good three-headed dragon with Petty. He's been surprising, and then obviously your top two. I'm a huge JT Toppin fan. Who I think is going to be player of the year. It's going to be him, Boozer, maybe a couple others, but I really like, and Yaxel, of course, really like him. I think they can score on all three levels, and I think this team, when they need to, they can get in the trenches, muck it up a little bit, and defend. The second team that I have that could win it all in this group of five is number 13, BYU. This is a team we talked about at the beginning of the year that I was very high on. I'm trying to tune into as many BYU games as I can. They've got a great home court advantage. We haven't seen Richie Saunders in full force, which is a little bit surprising. That being said, another great three-headed dragon led by arguably, I think definitively top three, arguably number one freshman AJ Diabanza, averaging 24, 7, and 4. As Josh mentioned, he was one of the three freshmen who scored 40 plus points last night, scoring 43. This BYU team, they have had a couple of games where they're down at halftime and they battled back. I think winning that Clemson game down 15 at halftime, might have been like, oh, BYU slipped up. I think that Clemson team's pretty good, so that might be a big win. They've also got the gauntlet of the Big 12 coming up. I'm high on BYU.
Yeah, for me, BYU is I'm still in wait and see with them. I think they have some more to prove. That being said, their roster is certainly very talented. They got all the NIL money coming in. I agree with you on Texas Tech. I think they're right up there in the Big 12, like we mentioned, and they're certainly going to jump the rankings after knocking off Houston. Something that doesn't get talked about with Texas Tech a lot, I don't think, is their coach, Grant McClassen. I mean, he's
Coach
a
of the
great
year,
coach.
Big 12.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he's a great coach. I think he's one of the more underrated coaches that we have in our game. So it's been fun to watch him get his team to play, and Texas Tech's a team that I like watching. The rest of the 11 through 15, I think Illinois could win it all. I don't think they will, but I think they're talented enough. In we've talked about how the roster's constructed plenty. But they got so much experience, so many guys that have played a lot of basketball, a lot of guys that have played a lot of professional basketball. So I don't know if they're gonna be phased by the big moment. We saw them go to Mackey and knock off Purdue. That being said, it did take 46 points from a freshman, which obviously you're not going to get every night. So we'll kind of see how Illinois, maybe they're also in the wait and see category with me with BYU, see how they progress. And then also I'll give a shout out to Vanderbilt at 15. They came out hot. Shout out my brother Jason. He was begging us to talk about them. And they've kind of struggled a bit, losing to Texas, Florida, and Arkansas. But the entire SEC is they're, I think they have three losses right now in the SEC, and that would be enough if they were able to run the table to win the SEC, I think. I don't know if there's going to be a team in the SEC, and perhaps we can talk about this later because we got a big clump of SEC teams coming up in the rankings. But I don't know if there's going to be a team in the SEC that's going to have less than three conference losses at the end of the year. So they're definitely still contention for the SEC, and you win the SEC at this point, they're probably looking at like a 2 seed. So I think they're probably not going to win it all, but they've been a fun story to watch this year. Another great coaching job by Bington there. Look for him to maybe get some offers to leave this coming off season. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at in that group. What about you, Hunter?
Yeah, this is, I mean, sort of an interesting group because they all have, for the most part, they all have the firepower to make a run. I mean, you talk about some of the best scorers in the game in this group between Christian Anderson, Toppin, Debanza, you know, Tyler Tanner at Vandy's been really good, and Duke Miles and some of those guys. Virginia is also a team that, they took a tough loss at home to UNC yesterday, but kind of one of the other surprises of the season. I mean, they've been pretty effective on both ends of the floor. They've actually, I think, shot the three pretty well. Again, just feels like a team. Yeah. And I think that was your call for ACC Coach of the Year. I'd say that's absolutely in play at this point. But it does feel like sort of stars have to align type of group here. There's upside. I'd like to see a little bit more consistency out of some of these teams, but I mean, Texas Tech, Christian Anderson, JT Toppin is one of, if not the best duos in the country, in my opinion. Debansa, Richie Saunders, and Rob Wright is a very good trio of guard wing type players, and I think Debansa is exactly the type of guy that could go on one of those like crazy tears in March and sort of be one of the stories of the tournament. If they were to rip off some wins. I think the Kylan Boswell situation is something to watch with Illinois. I don't know, Josh. What do you know? What the timetable is on that? I think I saw like a month. Which, if that's the case, he would likely be back and ready to go for March. But obviously they won yesterday without him, but something to keep an eye on with Illinois specifically.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what his timetable is. I'm looking at it right now. Yeah, I see at least a month with the right hand fracture. So yeah,
Yeah,
broken handed. I feel like that's typically right around that 6 week mark. So that is a good call out, something to watch for. See how they navigate the meat of their Big Ten schedule without him, who's kind of their experience guy. That's been especially experienced in the Big Ten and playing for Illinois.
yeah. I mean, I
All
said it
right.
earlier, but I was real quick. I was going to say Illinois is tied for sixth in the country in odds to win it all, according to
Wow.
FanDuel. So
That's a
they're
little bit surprising.
they're right there. It's the five that you would expect: Arizona, Michigan, Duke, Houston, UConn, and then the next group is Illinois, Purdue, and Iowa State. And Texas Tech and BYU really aren't that far behind either. I mean, they're in the top 12 in odds to win it all. So I think that's right in line with what we're saying. I think a lot of these teams have the upside and the firepower. It's just going to be a matter of their draw and can they get hot at the right time.
I like that take. Coming in our 16 through 20, I've got two teams here circled that I think can win it all. At 16, and a team that I think can win it all is Florida Gators. At 17, Alabama. 18, Clemson. 19, Kansas. And at 20, a team that I think can win it all is Arkansas. We hit on the coaching 11 through 15, a lot of young coaches that we like who are doing a good job. I could argue that 16 through 20 are five coaches that I despise in college basketball. Not a big fan of Todd Golden. I hate Nate Oates. I think Brad Brunell finds ways to lose games for Clemson. I don't really have a problem with 19 Kansas Bill Self. And of course, the pod's favorite coach at number 20, Calipari. Um, Florida, suffering a loss at home. They struggled at the beginning of the year. We called out their guard play. Xavier Lee gets hot. They rip off three big wins. Everyone flips to Florida's back to being this powerhouse. They come at home to Auburn and they get beat at their own game. A great win for our Auburn Tigers. That being said, they with Condon, Tommy Haug, and Chinyalu, who has played great this year. This is a team, if they get any sort of production from Boogie Flan or Xavier Lee on a consistent basis, is a team I don't think will, but I think if they get a good draw and the stars align, this team is talented enough for me to win a title. And same with Arkansas. Arkansas, they've lost a couple of games here and there, but if Cal can get their guards playing right come March, they've got some experience with DJ Wagner, Brazil, and Knox, tailored with, freshman talent and one of the better freshmen of this year, Darius Acuff, and then Malik Thomas. I kind of think if they get hot like they did last year and maybe a favorable draw like Florida, stars would have to line a little bit for them as well. But I think they have the talent to win. And then the last team that I'm really going to talk about in this cluster is Bama at number 17. To me, the media, obviously, I have personal vendettas against them. I have never been a big fan of Nate Oates, whether, he's talking smack at midcourt, he's on the court trying to play defense, he's wearing a hideous outfit, he's defending a player who killed someone and another star player who gave him the weapon. Or he's speaking out against coaches for bringing in professional players and then doing it with Chris Bediako right away, having governors that work on Alabama's booster board support his players playing. I think this Bama team's overrated. They, to me, have a little bit of a locker room issue in some capacity. I think that stems from poor leadership from their coach. Phylon has had weird games where he's had two games where he's played limited minutes because of injury, and Nate Oates has disagreed with the injury relatively publicly. I think that's bizarre. You haven't seen a game where Aiden Holloway, Bethea, and Phylon have all played together. Bethea is nursing a preseason injury. I don't know what his status is or when he's running into form. Aiden Holloway has a mystery injury. It feels like every other game, kind of similar to like at Auburn. There were just some games where he wouldn't play or Bruce had suspended him for, violating team rules. I don't like this Alabama team at all. I've always hated Nate Oates. I do not think that they should. I think they might fall out of the rankings. This is not a good basketball team to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of what you see with a lot of their teams. They can score it. They're one of the better offensive teams in the league for whatever reason. Year after year, Nate Oates is able to get guys that cater to his, run and gun threes and layups system. And I think they have the offensive upside to knock off anyone. But again, on the other end of the floor, it's costing them games. It'll be interesting to see what happens with the Bediako situation because he is a nice, piece in the middle as a kind of a defensive anchor. If he's granted, eligibility to keep playing, I'll spare everyone my thoughts on that whole situation. This is a family friendly podcast, so won't go too far in depth there. But I'm with you, Peyton. I don't think it's quite there this year. I think LeBaron Philon's one of the five best guards, maybe five best players in college basketball. He's an absolutely dynamic scorer. He's going to be a hell of an NBA player as a 6'4" point guard. Um, Past that, I'm not really sure. Again, high ceiling, but the floor is a little bit lower. I'm not going to say that I think they can win a national title at this point, and honestly, I don't think Florida can either. I think the if that you gave of if they can get some better production from Flan and Xavier Lee, I don't know that they can. I mean Xavier Lee was in absolute hell yesterday. He ended up getting benched. He only played like 15 minutes. He had three turnovers very early in the game, and um, was kind of in hell when when he was in there on the floor. Condon is a little bit inconsistent as a scorer. Tommy Alex is a superstar. No denying that. He can shoot the three. He can drive, finish really well at the rim. Um, he's a great player. I just don't think when it comes time, they're going to need one of those two in Lee or Flan to carry him, and I don't see it happening. Um, Arkansas, again, wildly talented. I think it's some of the same inconsistencies that you see from Cal teams, at least, in the later part of his career. Darius Acuff is, yeah, one of the best five freshmen in the country. I think he's one of the better freshmen, honestly, that Cal has ever had. And I know that's tall talk, but the guy is insanely good. And Kansas, I think they're dangerous at home, especially when Darren Peterson plays. It's tough for anyone to go into the fog and win. The Peterson situation has just been it's been way too up in the air. I mean, it was a hamstring for a while, and I think now it's an ankle that he's missing some games for. He didn't play yesterday, um, and I think they're really going to rely on him come March. And if he's not full go or has to miss a game for whatever reason, I just don't know that they're going to get the production from some of the other guys. Um, I don't have anyone in this tier that can win a national title personally. I think there are some teams that have the upside to make a Final Four type run, but if any of these teams run into a hot Duke or Michigan or one of those teams late in the year, I don't see them being able to get it done.
Yeah, I think y'all covered it pretty well, especially on the SEC teams. Don't need to dive too much into that. I will echo what y'all have said about Acuff, though. I think to me, he's one of the most fun players to watch play. He's a stud. Yeah, and then with Kansas and Clemson, I don't know too much about Clemson. I know if David Green's listening right now, he's screaming at us to talk about Clemson. Um, but I don't know. I don't see them as a team that can make a deep run. We'll see how they look. They haven't played Duke yet, have they?
No.
I don't know if they played Louisville either, so I don't know how like tested they really are. Let's see. Let me pull up the
I mean,
schedule.
they're a good defensive team. It's another one of those teams that I think the offensive output caps them a little bit. Um, And granted, I haven't watched a ton of them this year. I mean, RJ Godfrey's been
Hmm.
fairly solid, and his return, started at Clemson, went to Georgia, and is now back at Clemson. But um, I just don't. I mean, they're 68th in offensive efficiency on Ken Palm. They are 68th on Torvik as well. They've got some good numbers from the defensive side, but I just think, man, it's tough if you're that far out of the top tier offensive teams come March. I think it's tough to make any kind of run, and that's I won't pretend to admit that I know a ton about Clemson, but from the little bit that I've seen and kind of following them, that's sort of my takeaway.
Yeah, Godfrey and Hunter have been big pieces for them for the past couple of years. And looking at their Torvik page, for four of their top five contributors are seniors, and then the fifth is a junior. So they're definitely experienced, and they've been playing together for a while. And looking at their future schedule, they only have Duke and Louisville once each, and they're only not favored in two games at Duke and at North Carolina. They're actually 0.4 favorites at home against Louisville, so that's kind of a pick 'em. So they're going to be. My guess would be right in the 5 through 6 range seed. And maybe not a team you want to face if you're a 4 seed or a 3 seed in the second round. But I don't see them as a team that's gonna be competing for a national title. I would love to be wrong though. And then yeah, Kansas, you kind of touched on a Hunter with the Darren Peterson situation. That seems kind of weird. Not entirely sure what's going on with that. But they got some other guys. Fleury's been having a good year, kind of a
Yeah,
bit not disappointing last year, but maybe didn't live up to all the hype he had coming in, and he decides to come back. I'm sure his huge NIL check has something to do with that, but he is having a pretty solid second season. So I think Kansas could make a run. I think they're kind of at that bottom of the first tier of the Big 12, maybe kind of leading the second tier of the Big 12.
yeah, I would
Um,
agree.
but playing at Fog Allen, they can knock off any team at Fog Allen. So with that home court advantage, they're going to be, I think they're going to be, the last 3 weeks or so, they're going to be contention for one of the top two teams in the Big 12. And then yeah, Florida, like y'all mentioned, they had all the, defending national champs, brought a lot of the team back, had to replace a lot of guard production, but the front court is it's pretty much the same from last year. So um, yeah, like y'all said, it comes down to Boogie Flynn and Xavier Lee. Can they contribute together at the same time? Can they make the winning plays and kind of take some of the pressure off of their front court? So that'll be something to watch going forward with Florida. Do we lose Payton?
Looks like it.
All right.
Um,
We can keep going. I have it pulled up. Hopefully he's able to rejoin. 21 Georgia, 22 North Carolina, 23 Louisville, 24 St. Louis, and 25 Miami, who we should talk about St. Louis and Miami. But for me, I don't see Georgia winning at all. North Carolina, I think they're a good team, but I'm not sure if they're going to be playing past the second weekend. And then Louisville is a team that I still believe in. I think we were all really high on them preseason. They've had some big wins. The Kentucky win isn't aging as well as they probably would have hoped it would, but they've also have been struggling sometimes in some games, and kind of recently they've been struggling a bit. But I still believe in them with those guards. I haven't watched them play Indiana, they looked really good against us, and I guess it's not that hard, but they with the guard production they have in Brown and Conwell, and Isaac McNeely, I feel like he doesn't get talked about enough with that Louisville team. Um, they they can, have three guys that can hit shots from anywhere in the gym. So they're definitely a dangerous team to me. And they got Duke coming up tomorrow, I believe, on Monday.
yep.
So at Duke, gonna be a tough one for them, but that's gonna be a rocking environment. But we'll see what they're made of, see if they're able to go in and make that a competitive game. And then St. Louis and Miami, I mean, St. Louis is an interesting one. Their coach is the former Indiana State guy who brought them to the
Yeah.
tournament, Josh Yurts. And since he's gone over to St. Louis, they've been a really good team. And looking at the Torvik page, they're projected to go undefeated the rest of the way. So, and none of those games look to be really close. Granted, they're not playing the best competition, but it'll be interesting to see how they stack up when they play a Power 4, Power 5 team. Their one loss this year is to Stanford at a neutral site. Besides that, they haven't really been tested, it doesn't look like. And they have a very weak out of conference schedule too. So who knows how good they are? But it's always a fun story when you have a couple of teams coming in, maybe not from one of the power conferences that are looking pretty good, as well as Miami. Justin Steele, I believe, is the head coach at Miami. They've looked unbelievable as well. So, what are y'all's thoughts on those group of five? Any of those teams stand out to you as teams that can make a run?
I
Louisville.
think, yeah, I think big thing to note with Louisville is Michael Brown, first game back yesterday, had missed over a month of time. And obviously they've slipped up a little bit in that time period, but talk about a dynamic backcourt that can make some noise in March. I think between Brown, Conwell, and Isaac McNeely, like they've got some of the pieces.
Still 15th on Torvik
Yeah,
despite their struggles.
yeah. I mean they can score with the best of them. They lost a weird game out at Stanford at the beginning of conference play without Brown. Obviously lost to Duke as most do. And then they lost to Virginia, who has actually been a very good team to this point in the season. Um, so it'll be interesting now that Michael Brown's getting back. I think they're still, I think Duke's winning the ACC, but I think they're right there with an argument for being the second best team in that league, along with UNC and Virginia. Um, so something to note there. And then Carolina, I think they're a good team. Impressive win yesterday. I think they've got a nice trio to kind of anchor around with Caleb, Visar, and Seth Trimble. Seth Trimble's had a nice year. You know, coming since he's come back from that injury. Um, it'll be interesting to see again how things play out down the stretch. Their ACC schedule is not too terribly difficult. But that said, they've also lost. They went out west and lost to Stanford and Cal. Um, but Caleb Wilson is a freshman that's not getting probably talked about as much this year, just given some of the other guys in the class. But I mean, he's every bit of a top 5 pick in the NBA draft, in my opinion. And I think they've got some pieces and some firepower. I don't know. I was trying to see where they are, like analytically, like they're 29th on Ken Palm. Their defensive numbers aren't very good. They're 30th on Torvik. So analytically, they're not getting a ton of love. I think there is a little bit of a ceiling there, but North Carolina, you never know. They've got talent. They always will. So, yeah. And then St. Louis, Miami of Ohio are kind of fun, frisky teams that could make some noise as kind of mid to lower tier at large seed. Georgia, I don't think there's a ton to talk about there. I think they'll be maybe I don't know that they'll even be in the mix for a double bye in the SEC tournament. They got boat raced at Texas yesterday. They've got some offensive flash and upside, but when you're talking about contenders and teams that could potentially make a run, I don't think any of these teams are winning the national title. It would be Louisville and Carolina for me.
Yep, Georgia is who we thought they were. They've played one ranked team. They've kind of fell off lately. I completely agree with the landscape of the 21 through 25. I think Michael Brown being back for Louisville definitely elevates that ceiling for them. But outside of that, no big needle movers in this range. But as we transition quickly, we were going to hit on the freshmen. But before that, just wanted to give our listeners an updated pick standing. Please subscribe, follow the Instagram and Spotify, ball up top, as well as the YouTube. But for our pick standings, and still in third place, myself at 27 and 36, 3 games behind Josh, 6 games behind Hunter. Josh coming in at second at 30 and 33, and Hunter in first place at 33 and 30. As the season gets on, injuries develop, teams start playing a little differently, conference play opens up. It's been tough to get on the right side of some of these picks. I think we've kind of struggled as a group on the pod, but still
Yeah, no kidding.
right right around 500. I think that's pretty good for our first year doing this. If we wanted to have good records, we take minus 300 money lines, but we're not giving you that. We're giving you the straight spread. So a little bit of a difficult task, but we're doing our best. We're hanging in there. Now we decided that we kind of wanted to talk to you guys about the freshman class. I feel like in today's age, you think college basketball is broken. I think even college football is broken. We talked about the beginning of the year with basketball. The transfer portal was huge. In football landscape, the transfer portal is everything. The freshmen have kind of lost their allure. This year in college basketball, though, the freshmen have shined. It's been a lot about the recruits that have been brought in. They have made a lot of impact. I'll let you guys kind of pick and choose who you want to talk about, but I've got my top 10 listed out. Cam Boozer from Duke, averaging 23.94. Darren Peterson at Kansas, 22.4-2. AJ Diabonza, BYU, 24.6-4. I think those three guys are the top three picks in your NBA draft. Then you kind of move through the rest. You got Caleb Wilson, Darius Acuff, Kingston Flemings, Eaton Wagler. Koa Pete has kind of fallen just statistically. He reminds me personally a lot of Al Horford. I think if he gets drafted in the NBA to the right team, he could be very prolific, but only averaging 15 and 6. That's why he's a little further down on my list. Yeah, I know.
So that just goes to
crazy.
show how
But
good
when
the
you look
class
at the rest of
is.
the class,
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy. And then number 9, one that we haven't really talked about, and I think he has earned his flowers, and a guy that he plays for a team that I picked against a lot, and it's bit me in the butt, is Ibuka Okori at Stanford. He's quietly averaging 22, 4, and 3. He's been great at the guard position. I've actually seen Rothstein compare him to Trae Young. I haven't watched a lot of his basketball, but that indicates to me that he likes to pull it from deep. And then wrapping up, my last freshman was Braden Mullins at UConn. Again, not necessarily the greatest numbers at 11, 4, and 1, but he's a spark plug. He plays limited minutes off the bench because I think that team is more defense focused. But when they need some scoring, they go to him, and that says a lot for a small freshman.
Yeah, I would add Michael Brown and Kingston Flemings. Did you say Michael Brown?
I said Kingston Flemings. I did not say Michael Brown.
Yeah, to your point, like those first three, those are the top 3 picks in the draft in whatever order you want to put them in. I think Debanza's, well, I don't know, man. Peterson too. It's funny. I think Boozer's been the best player in college basketball this year. I think he goes third of those 3 in the draft. Just given Peterson and Debanza are maybe a little bit more dynamic as scorers. Then you got Caleb Wilson, Acuff, Kingston Flemings. It's a absurd class. You mentioned the guys that had 40-point games yesterday. Acuff and Boozer also had 30-point games. So you're talking about 5 or 6 guys that just absolutely lit it up on the same day. And these are all guys that are capable of doing that at any given time. This is, in my opinion, at least off the top of my head, the best freshman class from a college basketball perspective that we've ever seen. Time will tell how they all pan out in the NBA, but just stupid loaded when you talk about this class. And it's been really fun to watch because a lot of them are doing it for some of the better teams in the country and leading some of the better programs in college basketball.
Yeah, and someone we didn't mention who I think was the number 1 rated prospect on some of the services come into the season was Nate Ament at Tennessee. He's had a
great year.
Quietly really good year too. But yeah, to me, I agree with what you're saying about Boozer kind of being the third. He's obviously having an unbelievable season, probably right now the favorite. I haven't looked at the odds, but the favorite to win Player of the Year. But I think maybe Peterson and AJ might be a tad bit ahead of them for in terms of NBA prospects. I know as a Hawks fan, I would rather have probably Peterson or AJ over Boozer. That could just be more of a team fit too. Yeah, no, it's been fun watching these freshmen. Michael Brown was a good good mention. He deserves to be talked about. His injury kind of derailed his season. And Braylon Mullins, he missed the first, I think, 5 or 6 weeks with injury as well. So they started him off on the bench, and then they were getting him back into the starting lineup. But actually, in the Villanova game, he got hurt again. I think they were saying it was like maybe potentially concussion. I haven't really checked to see how what the timetable is going to be like on that today. But I've just been paying attention to him being an Indiana guy, and also him being my Big East newcomer of the year pick preseason, which with the injuries probably not looking like it's not going to happen. But he's been fun to watch this season, and as he gets more minutes, more comfortable in college basketball. But yeah, no, this really has been the year of the freshman in college basketball, which we kind of saw that in the early 2010s being like a big thing when they got rid of the one and done rules. And then
Yeah,
there seemed to be kind of like a switch at the beginning of the NIL era and the transfer portal era to get old. And I still think that's how you win is you have to be old, but also
I
having
agree.
elite prospects and elite talent that at a given time can go win you a game is also something that's important to have. So I think that's having the right mix of, Arkansas approach and a Michigan State approach of maybe combining those two and having those 4-year player guys, but also having those guys that are only going to be in your program for 1 year that you pay those big NIL checks to that, are uber talented, get eyes on your team, and also can go win you some big games.
I agree with both
Yep.
of you guys. Very loaded freshman class. The young guys have been impactful, at least up until this point this season. Curious to see how they finish and lead some of their teams maybe deep into March. But I guess probably now what a majority of you guys have been waiting for, kind of a recap of our two teams. Josh, you want to kick us off with how Indiana's been the last couple of weeks, where you see them going, what the upcoming schedule holds.
Yeah, so I think when we last recorded, we had just played Siena in towards the end of December, and then after that we were done with out of conference. We were strictly Big Ten rest of the way. So I'll quickly rattle off what our record's been since then and how we did against each team, but I'm not going to talk about each team in detail, kind of talk about it large
Yeah.
picture. So at home against Washington win, at Maryland win, home against Nebraska loss, at Michigan State loss, home against Iowa loss, at Michigan loss, at Rutgers win. So I really want to focus more so not on the Washington, Maryland, or Rutgers game, but on the Nebraska, Michigan State, Iowa, Michigan. That was a big stretch for us. It was going to be our hardest stretch of the season. Those are 4 teams that are top 25 in net and in Torvik and KenPom and all the rankings. So 4 quad 1 matchups. And I was kind of hoping we'd go 2-2 in those. Going in my mind, Nebraska at home and Iowa at home are obviously the 2 games that I saw us having the best chance of winning. And I think we were favored in both those games. That Nebraska game was an excruciating watch. We were up 16 with I think 15 or 16 minutes left in the second half, and then completely fell apart. Um, God, I want to look it up. I think it was his name's Jamarcus Lawrence. Is that right? Yeah,
Yeah,
Jamarcus Lawrence on Nebraska. He got so hot in the second half, man, and he was hitting everything. It was crazy. It was a really impressive performance by him. Sanford only had 12, Mast only had 13, but Lawrence had 27, 5 from 8 from three. So we couldn't stop him. He was a flamethrower that game, and we blew a chance to give Nebraska the first loss. Um, you know, it was a quad 1 opportunity that I don't care who you're playing. I don't care how good your team is. If you're up 16 in the second half, that's a game you got to win. And then, at Michigan State, that's another game going in that was like, I want to see us be competitive. I want to see us play hard and have a chance to win at the end, but not necessarily a game I was expecting to win. I think we were like 8-point dogs going into that. And we were tied 53-53 with 11 minutes left or so, 12 minutes left. And we lost 81-60. They went on like a 28-7 run at some point in that over the last 11 minutes. And I think at one point it was like a 19-0 run, another 19-0 run we gave up, but like we did to start the Louisville game. So again, inability to play 40 minutes, inability to close out in the second half. It's been a problem against Nebraska, against Michigan State, against Minnesota, against Kentucky. It's definitely been a theme for this team. And then Iowa was just an awful performance, probably a worst performance of the year, I would say. Bennett Sturts was hitting step back threes over 2 guys right in their face in Assembly Hall. It was that I had zero fun watching that game. We were never in that game. We looked uninterested in playing that game. And yeah, that's all. I don't really need to talk about that much anymore. Um, And then Michigan, that was always going to be a loss. I thought they fought pretty hard, especially in the second half, but where Michigan's a much better team than us. We were overpowered there. Bigger picture, I would say Tucker DeVries has got to figure it out. And in the Rutgers win we had this past Friday, it was his best game he's had since, I don't know, since November, maybe beginning of December. He really struggled in that 4 game stretch where we were losing games, and our team's only going to go as far as Tucker DeVries will take us. And he's going to be one of the first two guys on the opposing team scouting report. He's getting run off the 3-point line, so he's got to make adjustments to that. I like when he's able to drive, not necessarily to the rim, but get the ball in the paint. And one super underrated part of his game that hasn't gone away the past month is his passing. He is such a good passer. He's played a lot of college basketball. I mentioned earlier him and Ike going back and forth on the total points scored in college basketball, but he's really good at finding guys cutting to the rim. So I like to see him keep distributing the ball. He's got to be able to hit some 3-point shots and get his confidence back, which looks like the Rutgers game was a good step in the right direction. Also in the Rutgers game, Nick Dorn moved into the starting lineup because Tane Connery has been dealing with an injury. He only played limited minutes coming off the bench. And Nick Dorn looked really good. He only takes threes, which is kind of fun to watch. But he's got a lot of confidence. He can shoot from anywhere. And if we can get DeVries, Dorn, and Wilkerson going at the same time, then that's a really dangerous three. That's a three that you're going to have to guard the 3-point line hard, and maybe we can get some of our undersized bigs some easier looks. Reed Bailey, man, he's been struggling. I think it might be a mental issue with him. He's a really good dribbler, really good passer, but he just can't finish at the rim, which obviously as a big man in the Big Ten, that's like priority number one is get rebounds and finish at the rim.
Yeah.
So hopefully we can get him going and get his confidence back up. Seems like Sam Alexis has fully taken over as a starter, which I support. But Sam Alexis at the end of the day was brought on this team to be a role player. He's not going to be a dominant guy, but he does do his job well. You can pretty much pencil him in for 7 or 8 points and 4 or 5 rebounds a game, which if he's your backup big, that's great. But as your starter, you probably want a little bit more. But unfortunately, that's just kind of his game. But I have no complaints about Sam Alexis. He's been a good addition to the team. Going forward, I mentioned earlier, big game home against Purdue. Obviously, this is the most important game of the year for Indiana fans. You want to beat Purdue, especially at home. You want Darren DeVries to get off to a good start against Purdue. Mike Whitson actually did a decent job against Purdue. He struggled against Rutgers and against Nebraska, but he went 3-3, I believe, against Purdue in his tenure, maybe 4-4. So, hopefully Darren DeVries can establish that we're going to be able to compete with Purdue, both on the court and in recruiting for Indiana guys. And yeah, that's going to be a tough matchup. Like I said, they're coming off 2 losses. And then we have a little bit of a West Coast trip at UCLA, at USC, and then home against Wisconsin. So I think Purdue's going to be a tough one, but it's at home. The place is going to be rocking. At USC and at UCLA are both going to be tough games as well. But, I'd like to maybe pick up one of those. Do I think we will? Probably not. But if we go 1-1 out west, I'd be very happy with that. And then at home against Wisconsin, that's going to be another tough game. But that's probably a game where we're either going to be favored by 1 or 2 points, or Wisconsin will be favored by 1 or 2. So it's going to be a really, really tight spread, and kind of be a toss up. And you want to protect home court and Assembly Hall. So overall thoughts, I think there's a lot of room for improvement. I think the depth is an issue. I think this team fouls way too much. And Tucker DeVries has to get going. But some positives, they don't play great defense one-on-one, but as a whole, they communicate really well and they play some good, solid team defense, especially as an undersized team in the Big Ten, which has been impressive. The rebounding has gotten better. It's still not great, but they out-rebounded Rutgers, which Rutgers is terrible. It's not saying much, but it's been good to see them, especially on the offensive glass, hustling harder for the loose balls. And then Lamar Wilkerson has been a positive. Nick Dorn's development has been a positive. I would kind of like to see, once Tin Conway is fully healthy, start Conway, bench Connor Enright, and start Nick Dorn. And then you could go Conway, Dorn, Wilkerson, DeVries, Sam Alexis. I think that's a pretty solid starting five. When Tin Conway gets driving to the basket, it'll open up our 3-point shooters with the other 3 guys and open up Sam Alexis on the pick and roll down low. So overall thoughts, bubble team still got to start winning some of these big games. Plenty of opportunity left on the schedule, but going 0-4 in that 4-game stretch was definitely not ideal.
What's your record now, and where do you what just a broad summary of where you think you need to see it at the end of the year to solidify March? I know obviously certain wins mean more than others and certain losses affect more than others as well, but where do you see this Indiana win and loss from a measurable standpoint? Where do they need to be to be playing in March?
Yeah, so we're 13-7 overall right now, and 4-5 in the Big Ten. I think we got to get to 20 wins. So that would, let's see, that would put us at 11-9 in the Big Ten, I believe. Um, so in order to do that, we have to go 6-4 down the stretch, or 7-5. So yeah, 7-5 down the stretch, which
Okay.
going to be tough. It's good, but I think it's doable. I mean, we have Minnesota at home. We got to win that game. Northwestern at home. Got to win that game. Oregon at home. Got to win that game. So assuming you can win those 3 games as a bubble team, you have to win those games. Then you got Purdue at home, at Purdue, at UCLA, at USC, at Ohio State, which that last game at Ohio State, last game of the year, they look to be another bubble team. That could end up being a pretty big one. But yeah, I think 7-5 down the stretch definitely keeps you in the conversation and hopefully puts you on the right side of the bubble. But it'd be nice to knock off at Illinois, Purdue at home, at Purdue, and kind of get one of those marquee wins that will kind of put us a tier ahead of some of the other bubble teams when Selection Sunday comes around.
Gotcha. I think it's doable. I think winning this week against Purdue would be a huge step in that right direction.
That would be awesome.
Well, alrighty, that'll take us to our Auburn Tigers. I think for the sake of time, and one, appreciate you guys for listening. If you've been listening for this long, we'll quickly run through the scores of the games. I think Hunter and I are foaming at the mouth to just get in depth about the Florida game, but the other 3 we can breeze by. Um, Last time we talked on our heat check, we listed out a 5-game span where I said we needed to go 4-1 to garner my respect again. I think Hunter said 3-2. We started off losing to Missouri 84-74 and what looked like another lifeless game from this Auburn team. Then we beat South Carolina 71-67, led by podcast favorite Flip Jovich. Then we won at Ole Miss 78-66. And then the big surprise here to me, last night we won at Florida for the first time since 1996. It got close for 2 minutes, but from just a an energy, physicality perspective, we went into their trap and took over their trap and beat them pretty convincingly, 76-67. This Auburn team to me, God, they suck me in. And I don't really know what to say other than, again, ceiling floor, same thing. I think when this team plays like this, I see them in the Sweet 16. When they don't, I can see how they could arguably not make the tournament. But to that point, needed to go 4-1 in that span. We have Texas left, who's looked good as of late. We're 3-1. I think we can win there. That would be huge for us. Not to jump back and forth, but that Florida game, you've got a game that I think Stephen Pearl really wanted to win. He's playing for the first time as head coach against Todd Golden, former Auburn staffer. Also, they're great friends. They played together in Israel, and then obviously coaching together at Auburn. I think they hung out the night before at Todd Golden's house. Just guys that, winning that game for Steven, I think meant a lot. And it showed the way that his players came ready to play come tip off, which to me, if you can find a way to do that every freaking game of the year, like that would be very nice going forward. Hall was electric in the first half, finished with 24, 7, and 4. Now, this is something that I know our Auburn fans are wanting us to talk about. And this is when, Hunter, I would love to have you chime in. Tahad Pettiford, we got in his grill on our Auburn heat check. He struggled. Sorry,
You got a disco going on in there.
I'm filming through a night storm.
He, to me, has been very underwhelming, and he continues to be underwhelming. Flashback to flashback to episode 4. I called him a point shaver. I'm still not off of that, especially with all the ongoing investigation with college basketball. He makes some boneheaded plays. He turns the ball over a lot. That being said, Auburn is so thin with guys who can handle the ball. We're asking Blake Mishailik to come in and play some big minutes. Who is that, you might
Hey,
ask? I
put
mean,
some
I'm not
respect
hating
on it.
on it, but if you're a good Auburn team, if you need a lot of good minutes from him, that's a problem. Caden Magway, MIA. Keyshawn Hall has been great, and he could arguably handle the ball, but he turns the ball over just as much as Dahad. Um, last year they didn't ask a whole lot of Hod other than to close games. They had a lot of ball handlers that I think hid a lot of his turnover problems and forced shots. He didn't have to do that last year. This year's team has kind of asked him to do that. That being said, what he did at the end of that Florida game, I think, is going to go very unnoticed. When they got it
Yeah.
tight, he went 3 for 3 in the final 6 minutes, hit some big shots, 4 for 4 from the free throw line, scored 8 of his 11 points. He did close that game, and that's what he did last year. So I'm going to
Yep.
give him his flowers there. I think there's still a work ethic problem maybe on his end from a consistency standpoint, but just a great win from Auburn. A great win. I'm bought back in.
Yeah, I think on the Tahad front, like one thing too that is definitely not getting talked about enough is he gave Boogie Flan and Xavier Lee hell yesterday on the defensive end. He really was pretty solid. And I know that's something that Stephen Pearl has spoke ad nauseum about, is getting more from Tahad on that end of the floor. And there are just some times where I just shake my head because I'm like, what, from an effort standpoint, like what are you doing? You literally look like you couldn't care less about what's going on out on the floor. There are some times where I question the attitude a little bit. But I think there is something to be said. You made the point about, what his role was last year compared to what it is this year. I think he's at his best as an off-ball pure scorer. And I think they were able to showcase him in that role more last year, given the talent that we had on the team. I think there were some times last year where the offensive efficiency took a little bit of a hit when he played point guard. Um, I just think that's not really who he is. But unfortunately, to your point, with the depth and the makeup of the roster this year, he has to be that guy. So I will give him a little bit of benefit of the doubt in that it's a significantly different role. He's got a lot more on his shoulders this year. Um, but dude, if you want to be an NBA player, then get used to it. Um, so credit to him for closing out the game the way he did. I think the second run when Florida came back and took the lead by 2 was even more impressive than what we did, to open the game up. And we started up 19-5, and Florida slowly worked their way back into it by halftime, took a lead kind of middle of the second half, and I'm like, oh, here we go again. But the answer to me was massive, and that was, I think, really indicative of what this team can be capable of. Um, you know, Ripped off 3 straight wins. I know, Ole Miss and South Carolina are not anything special this year. I was sort of at a rock bottom after the Missouri game. I just thought that was brutal all around, effort wise. Couldn't hit shots, just really really lackluster performance. And I think there's reasons to be optimistic going forward. I think 3-point shooting is a real problem. Outside of Keyshawn Hall, we don't have anyone that really can consistently hit shots from outside. Murph has done a decent job. SWA has hit some shots from outside, but Tahad's shooting, like they said yesterday, he's shooting like 16% from 3 in conference play. That's just, we can't have that. But things were looking sort of doom and gloom after the first 4 games of conference play. You've turned it around, won 3 straight. You got a big stretch coming up. Um, you know, Texas, who has been, they've picked some teams off this year, and then you've got, oh, we lose him. Yeah, he's going through it with the power over there. Um, then you go, Tennessee, Bama, Vandy, Arkansas, 4 in a row. So that's an absolutely brutal stretch. If you can get 2 of those, which I think is going to be really tough, that'd be huge. But just I was looking back, last year there were 6 seeds that had 11 and 12 losses.
Yeah.
And I think right now sitting at 7, Torvik has us projected. They have us underdogs in 4 more games. So, if you play that out, that's 11 that's 11 losses. With a really tough schedule played, I think you could be potentially in position for, a 7. Being a 7 seed would be huge. I don't want any part of the 8-9 game and then having to go play a 1 seed right after that. I think you have a lot better chance at picking off a 2 or a 3 seed than you do a 1. So again, the upside's there. They've shown they can beat any team in the league with how they played against Arkansas and Florida. And I think the consistency is getting there. They've been a lot better on the defensive end, but really, really tough stretch coming up. I'll be interested to see over these next 5 how where they come out of that stretch. And then it gets a little bit better. We have to go to Mississippi State and Oklahoma. Those are very winnable in my opinion. We play Oklahoma and LSU at home, or sorry, Ole Miss and LSU at home. Should take care of business in all of those. I'm optimistic that we can split with Alabama. I could see the home team taking each of those games. Arkansas, we got to go there. They're going to want revenge for sure. I'm not sure we take that one, but that said, if you come out of the regular season with 11 or 12 losses, I think you're in good position to stay off the bubble. And then it's really just going to be up to draw and who do what seed line are you on and who are you looking at as a second round game. But great win yesterday, reasons to be optimistic going forward, and we'll see how things play out over a tough 5-game stretch here.
Yep, you lost me for a second, and if you're watching on YouTube, this is probably podcast gold. My phone overheated, and I'm outside cooling it down by filming in the ice storm. It's actually ridiculous. But this Auburn team, like Hunter hit on, there's a shot here that we go on a little bit of a run. Our next future games will definitely show kind of where we stack up. Come March, the SEC appears to be wide open. I think if you take away, that buzzer beater that got off but didn't get off against A&M, that's a huge win. You barely lose at Stegman. You could flip a coin and you easily win those games. And I know, coulda, woulda, shoulda, but you win those 2 games, you're first place in the SEC. Like that, I mean, that's crazy to think about this Auburn team. They've also played 8 ranked games. Not a lot of teams can say that they played 8 ranked games. 1 at home, 7 on the road. You've won 3 of those. So come March, having some of those big wins on the road, I mean, that could mean a lot. But Josh, you have anything from an outsider perspective on this Auburn team?
Yeah, I mean, to me, the big thing that stood out when watching the Florida game was the defense. Auburn's
Yeah.
defense has struggled a lot going into, I'd say probably into January. But looking at Torvik back, I think when we last had the pod in December, I think you were around like 110, 120th in defense, and now you're all the way down to 72nd. So trending downwards, and it's definitely being reflected on the court that Florida win was a really impressive defensive effort. And still 12th in offensive efficiency on Torvik. So as long as that offense stays there and the defense continues to trend, I think Auburn could turn out to be a pretty dangerous team. And like you said, a couple close losses away from being towards the top of the SEC. So definitely with some of the harder games coming up in the SEC, I think you'll have a chance to kind of reestablish yourselves as in that top tier. But yeah, no, the defensive effort to me has really stood out over the past 2 or 3 weeks.
I would agree.
Well, alrighty. I know this was a long one, but we felt it was probably necessary given, college basketball and especially in the South, football comes first. So we wanted to do a deep dive and highlight some of the freshmen and then obviously recap our teams. But appreciate you guys listening for this long. If you haven't, subscribe, comment, the Instagram, the YouTube. We're trying to grow all of our socials. And, with these next couple of weeks coming, we're going to hope to release some more content. So stay posted there. Again, appreciate you guys for listening, and may your team's odds be in your favor.
See you, everyone.
See you.